Most of you are catching on to my sense of humor anyway, so that's good. So we talked first week about that I feel the most important thing about communication is owning it ourselves, owning the principle ourselves, embodying it. And then last time we talked about how I just shared some inspiration and some, hello Kira, and some stories to hopefully help you feel like you can be inspired and to embody it a little more. So today I thought I'd start anyway, talking about how I did the communication thing and why. And again, I just can't stress enough that I don't want you to copy what I did, please. I mean, what I did, and I'm going to share with you what I did in the last 12 years of my practice, because I did all kinds of other things before that. And even though I could look at that and say, I wish I hadn't, I think they all led up to what I eventually found was right for me and congruent with me. So that's principle number one. Your communication and your procedures have to be congruent with you. They have to express you. They have to be aligned with you. Otherwise it's going to be more like selling or convincing. And most of the selling and convincing you'll be doing is for yourself because you don't even believe in, in what you're doing. So don't do it because somebody else did it or said it was the right thing to do. I mean, obviously we need a place to start so you can take suggestions and ideas, but make it yours, because just like, when people called up and asked what my technique was, and my CAs would say he does the stew technique, that was very true because, I did a little diversified. I did a little, we all put together different techniques in different ways and come up with our own art, and that's how it should be. So it's kind of the same way with our communication. It has to be aligned with us. Does that make sense? Yes, do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So the first thing I would say is that communication, especially if we're talking about what's typically called patient education, needs to be worked right into your procedures. My procedures included education and promotion. It included everything because I didn't have to want to think. When I was adjusting people, I just wanted to be in my heart. I just wanted to be connecting innate to innate. I didn't want to have to think about, okay, it's visit 2. What am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to ask for them to refer? So it was just the same for everybody. And it became part of the procedure. So a lot of them were written on what we call travel cards back then. We actually had paper that followed along with the patient. These days, that's probably not happening too much, but it would tell me, okay, there would be a note on the card, this is visit 2. So this is the education card you give. And this is whatever. I didn't want to have to think. So work everything into your procedures. And the goal with every bit of procedure, every bit of education, every bit of communication is, well, you get to decide. So it's very important to consider, again, start with the end in mind. What do you want people to know? I mean, I don't think most chiropractors even think about that. They just want to spout stuff. They just want to impress people with what they know, but they're not really concerned about what they really want the patient to know. What do you want them to understand? And for me, it wasn't all that much. I didn't care if they could give me a dissertation. I didn't care if they could tell me about the proper cervical curve. I didn't even really care if they could repeat the word subluxation to me. I mean, that was nice because that's our terminology, but what was important for me was for them to know that they were the ones doing the healing, that both health and disease are inside jobs. You know what I mean there? Yes, everybody knows what I mean there? They're inside jobs. So part of that is knocking people off their little perch about thinking that disease comes from outside of them, and therefore, where are they going to look for health? If their belief is that there are things in the environment, and this is obviously going on big time now, if they think that they're being attacked and from outside, and that's why they get sick, then obviously where are they going to look for the answer to that? So I felt it was important for them to know that both the problem and the solution are inside of them. Why? Because I wanted them to know that they were a big part of this. In fact, I wanted them to know that they were the doctor. They had the greatest doctor in the universe, and it specialized in them, and it built them, and it rebuilds them, and it takes Twinkies and crappy foods and recreates them on an ongoing basis. I think this is really cool for people to know that they are a bit of a miracle, and that the life within them is miraculous and is way beyond their comprehension and way beyond their ability to really understand. I wanted them to know that. Okay, so part of that was I spent time in my mandatory pre-care class, and I'll go through my actual procedures in a second, was to talk about symptoms a bit and what symptoms are and why they're not necessarily bad and why they're not, definitely not my goal in care is simply to get rid of them. And when I go through my procedures, I'll talk about that a bit more. Okay, so I also, it's another principle, general principle about communication. I always strove to remember that the word education means to draw out. It does not mean to dump in and then expecting people to vomit all that information back to you. That's kind of what school is about, isn't it? Right? But that's not really what education means. It means to draw out. So what that means is we can start with the expectation and the knowing that people already know. They already know this shit. This is not brain surgery. This is not quantum. They know that their body heals itself. And on some level they know that their innate intelligence didn't go to school, medical school for one day and just learn how to heal cuts and broken bones and then took the rest of the semester off when it learned how to heal everything else. Did you follow that? That was kind of cute. They know. That's one of the biggest problems I think we have in chiropractic is we think nobody knows, nobody's going to believe us unless we give like PhD level dissertations and tell them again that everything they ever believed up to now was wrong. I don't think that's the best approach. Okay, let's start expecting them to know and then help draw that information out into their awareness. So many people after my talk would say exactly that. That is what I believed. That is what I have believed my entire life, but I could not have put it that way. I could not have expressed it to another person. And now I think I can. That's a beautiful thing to hear after a talk, wouldn't you say? Checking in with you now and then, so make sure you're listening. So yeah, you want to draw that out. They already have it within them. They already have an innate intelligence that knows. So when you talk to people, it's like reminding them, it's like waking them up to some sleep they've been in their entire life. It's like them coming home. It's a beautiful thing. If you just share it that way, share it with the energy of, I know you already know this, let's bring it back into our awareness because we probably really haven't thought about it. We haven't certainly made choices based on it maybe in a long time in our life. Okay. What else did I want them to know? Not much. I wanted them to know that they had an innate intelligence, that when it was free of interference, it was running the show in ways they could never comprehend or even understand, in miraculous, and doing things by the trillions. And I talked about how, when they were dead, if we were to weigh it, if you were standing on a scale at the moment of death, some people say it would change, but I don't believe it would change. In other words, physically, it's exactly the same. It's got all the chemicals, it's got all the parts, it's got all the organs, and yet it's not doing very much where a second ago it was doing 600 octillion things. So what changed is not a physical thing, right? It's an energy thing. It's life. It's innate intelligence. It's whatever people want to believe. It's got a lot of names, but I wanted people to be aware that that was what was running the show. And when it was free of interference, it ran the show beautifully, not just within here, but in harmony with everything else. Wow, is that a good message for people right now? Unless we believe that it's probably what I would be saying right now, unless you believe that innate, created us and fucked up because it didn't give us a mask. Anyway, don't get me going. I, I, I heard you guys have 60 people without masks. I'm going to report you. Just kidding. I'm so proud of you and I'm so jealous. Well, I just spent 25, a weekend with 25 people without masks. So that was cool. Anyway, I had to write it down because you have to, it's been 12 or 13 years since I delivered any of these procedures. But so yes, I started with a pre-care mandatory, and again, I love that. I think that's great. I think that's great on many levels, but I certainly don't think it's right for everybody. But if you're bold enough and you agree with these things, the reason I did that is because number one, I think I told you this already. If I only had one chance of interacting with this person, I wanted them to hear my talk, not get adjusted. That's me. I was certainly hoping they would get adjusted after hearing the talk. But if it was a choice between the one, I would rather them get the idea than get adjusted without having any idea why they got adjusted. Okay, that's just me. So that was one reason I did it. I did it also because as I've also told you, enjoyed working with people every day, day in and day out, that actually wanted to be in my office and wanted to be there for the reasons that I felt, were right. And how am I going to know that if I don't tell them what I believe and what I think it is and what I do and what I don't do? I don't know. I never figured out a different way, and I've tried every possible way. The other thing I loved about doing a talk was for me to commit to doing it. I was doing it twice a week for years. I got sick of it, I have to tell you. I got sick of hearing it after 12 years of doing it twice a week or whatever I was doing. So, I could have changed it up from now and then, but that's another story. And of course I did. But anyway, if you can get sick of it, that probably means you've done it enough. Because I needed to hear it. I needed to hear it over and over. I needed it for me. And it was a beautiful way to stay strong, to stay on purpose, and to stay congruent with what I was sharing with people. Those are the main reasons I did it first. Okay. And I'm really glad I did. And people sometimes would balk, meaning they would resist. They would say, "Why do I have to do that?" I've been seeing a chiropractor for my entire life, and I say, "Well, I didn't say it, but my staff would say, Dr. Stew would recommend that if you've seen other chiropractors, you really need to hear the talk because what we do here might be a lot different than what you have experienced in chiropractic before, because we really practice chiropractic." And, and being in the state of California, I could tell you that 9 people out of 10 would come to me that have been to other chiropractors and they'd never gotten an adjustment. And I'm like, what did they do? Rubbed me, they stretched me, they cooled me, they electrocuted me, they stuck needles in me, they did everything. And I said, did they actually do a chiropractic adjustment? What's that? Well, lay down and you'll find out. So anyway, I didn't make any exceptions because that's the purpose of having procedures. So you don't have to play let's make a deal and make exceptions based on what people tell you they know and what they tell you they need, because in my experience, everybody needed to hear the talk. Okay. And again, this is up to you. In our case, the talk was a prerequisite to being able to use the box on the wall to participate in our donation system. Because I don't know if you know that, but for the last 12 years of my practice, I didn't have fees. People put in the box what they could put in the box. I would recommend to them they put the most they could in the box, but that was up to them. Okay, but in order to do that, the talk was a mandatory thing, and it was a mandatory thing for everybody anyway, because I didn't talk about the box until they were at the talk. That's the first they heard about it. If they didn't want to follow my recommendations, we had a per visit fee that they could come in and not use the box. The box was for people who wanted to make chiropractic part of their life, because one of the things I wanted people to do, and I forgot to talk about this, we talked about what I wanted people to know, but I think it's also important to consider what you want people to feel. This is, again, in every bit of your procedures, what you want to have them end up feeling. And for me, that was easy too. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to feel hopeful. And I wanted them to feel empowered, meaning they were a big part of this. They were the ones doing the healing. This was something we were doing together. This was not something you come in here and lay down and I do something to you to create health in you. This is something we do together. This is something that I just do to facilitate what's already trying to happen in you. What's already, every fiber of your being is working toward restoring wholeness and connection. And sometimes there's just some interference getting in the way of that. That's my only role in this. I wanted people to know that, and I wanted them to feel. And I told you the number one phrase that was repeated back to me over the many years of my practice that made the most difference for people was that simple phrase that I'm the one doing the healing, meaning them. So it's not too simple to actually say to people over and over. Okay, and what I wanted to do in my case was come in on some regular basis for the rest of their life and get their spine checked and bring their kids and all their loved ones and refer everybody they know. That's what I wanted them to do. I also kind of wanted them to adopt more of an inside out approach to life. And I can't believe how many people actually did. And that was mostly because of the talk and my continued education. Okay, so that's it. I might actually do my health talk for you next time, if you like that. I mean, it'll be the current version of it, which is probably really good for me to do, since I don't really remember the old one anyway. But it'll be good for me to come up with a new one, because for one thing, I think I told you this, I spent a lot of time in my talk back then bashing medicine, bashing. I would do a lot less of that these days, just because I don't think it's definitely necessary. I think, again, some mention of how the status quo might not be always the wisest, most logical thing, that's good. To say something like, when you're talking about health and disease being an inside job, just, to say something like, what do you think, the flu virus comes around during the flu season and then the rest of the year it takes the vacation and flies off to Hawaii? And people would say, well, probably not. It's probably here all the time. And I said, okay, so how come you don't always have the flu? How come when you have the flu, somebody in your house always doesn't get it? So you can poke holes in that sort of accepted belief system, which is bullshit. But, again, you could do that in a loving way, and you could do that just briefly, because then you want to talk mostly about what's good about chiropractic and what's good about what you believe and why it works for you. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so that was before they started. When they came in, they filled paperwork out. They watched a short video, about a 4-minute video, recapping pretty much my 45-minute talk, just going over what I thought the main things were, because spaced repetition is very important. Don't think that you could do your beautiful talk and they'll have it. Okay, I doubt you got it hearing one person talk for 45 minutes. I know I didn't. So watched the video, then they had what our version of a consultation was, which was very educational, because it wasn't about symptoms. It was about, what's your life like? First of all, it was, what did you think about the talk, or what was one thing you got out of the talk? That's a much better question. What did you think of the talk? Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was very interesting. No, tell me one thing you got out of the talk. And again, if it was something like I'm the one doing the healing, then, A plus. Good job. Yeah, I have to cut into a story now. Sorry, it's just the way my mind works. So that's the consultation. I had two ladies at the talk prior to this one day, among other people. These two ladies started on the same day, and the first question my wife, who did the consultation, would ask is, tell me one thing you got out of the talk. And okay, so one of the ladies was a very traditional Christian woman, and the other lady was the leading Wicca leader in our community. And I don't know if you know what Wiccans are, but it's like pagan witch. It's not like black magic. Anyway, it's sort of pagan. It's about as diametrically opposed to traditional Christianity as you can get, is my point here. So they both come in, they're both asked the same question, and they both say exactly the same thing. That is exactly what I believe. Isn't that cool? So I segued into that story to tell you that if you stick to chiropractic philosophy, you'll get all kinds of agreement, even from people who don't agree with each other. Isn't that cool? Isn't that very cool? I really felt good about that. I really felt like I had arrived at the point where I was speaking in a, at least in a rather universal way. And that's the beautiful thing about especially our terminology, which people don't fully understand. It's like they can't get stuck on these words that might trigger them and send them back into old belief systems and stuff. Let's just talk chiropractic. And again, if these two people could say it's exactly what I believe, then I think we got something good going here. Okay, so consultation, and then so what I didn't say is I did my report of findings in my talk. I personally dislike even the term report of findings because I think it's a medical procedure. Because if a report of findings is based on, okay, how long will it take, how much will it cost, and all this kind of stuff, again, what's the it? What is the it? And I don't really believe in the three times a week, 2 times a week, 1 time a week thing either. And the reason I don't is somebody pointed this out to me at a seminar. When you're driving home and you're getting closer to home, do you slow down? It's a joke, folks. Well, maybe you do if you were taking the highway and now you're on smaller streets, but do you get the question there? No, man, why wouldn't you just keep up the same pace until you got home? So I asked people for a minimum of 4 months of care, and I told them in the talk that it would be either 2 times a week or 3 times a week based on the first time I checked them. Again, that was me. I thought about what is the minimum amount of care that I have in my experience seen was necessary to make any kind of change, any kind of real change in a pattern, any kind of real change in that person permanently. And I came up with 4 months. I don't know if anybody has the exact number on this, but you got to do what's right for you and ask for that. Ask for what you think people need. Why not lay out what you feel is ideal for them? Again, unless you have a my way and my first recommendation or the highway and you're out of here kind of attitude, I didn't. I offered them choices. Here's what I recommend. If you'd like that, you can use the box, pay whatever you like. If you want to come in on some other basis, pay me a lot of money. But don't expect me to do a consultation every time you come in. Don't expect me to ask you about your symptoms and stuff because I'm not. Whether you're coming in based on my recommendations or not, all I'm going to do is check you and adjust you. This is how I did it, folks. I'm going to keep repeating that. Okay, then I would check them, and based on pretty much my evaluation I didn't use objective stuff. And again, folks, I didn't even do an exam. I'm not recommending you do what I did. I did an exam for many years, but I did not do an exam for the last 12 years. It didn't matter to me about their orthopedic findings. It didn't mean, and I didn't want to do it just because it was something to compare to later. I just didn't give me any value. and I didn't think it gave them any value, so I stopped doing it. And therefore, I didn't have to do re-exams either, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to do re-exams if you haven't done an exam. So I'm telling you that I had zero, really what you would consider objective ways of pointing out that people needed the care. And my PVA was like 150 for 12 years. No x-ray, no, nothing. People just wanted to be adjusted because they got the idea. They got the idea that they were better off without interference than with. They got the idea that they probably were, creating stress and subluxations for many years in their life, and they have layers at this point, and that it would be good to work through as many layers as we can, because we want to get to the sweet part of the onion. That's the part in the middle, I guess. I used that analogy for years, so I'm hoping that was actually correct. Yeah. So again, I tell you that not so you could start off not using anything objective and stuff. Again, I didn't start riding a two-wheel bicycle without using training wheels for a few months first. We got to go through these steps. Now, maybe I can save you a step or two, especially the ones that don't feel congruent and don't feel like you. Because John DeMartini used to say 20% of what we do gets us 80% of our results. And 80% of what we do gets us 20% of our results. Guess which I would have you focus on more. Yeah. And the 20% that, the 80% that gets us 20% of our results has a lot of stuff in there that we don't necessarily even believe in, or, again, especially not you guys, but people who've been in practice for a while, they're doing all kinds of stuff. They couldn't even tell you why they do it anymore. They just do it because they've always done it. That's not a good reason. Okay, so these are good criteria to go by. All right, so based on what I considered was how their atlas was doing, I recommended twice a week or 3 times a week. Now, if I recommended 3 times a week and they say, that's a little stressful, I drive 30 miles to get here, I got 6 kids, I'm a single mom and 3 jobs, I'd say, well, how about twice? And they would say, okay, I can do that. And I'd say, great. And again, if they couldn't do that, then, once in a while, I allowed somebody to come in once a week. But I would tell them, I don't see the point in doing that, because we're not imposing enough of demand on anything to change. It's like you wouldn't go to the gym once a week, you wouldn't run once a week, you wouldn't change your diet once a week and expect any kind of pattern to change. That's to me, and this was part of my talk that you'll hear next week, that was why we asked for frequency of care, especially at first, to change a pattern, to break a cycle. I'd say, it's like if you ever paid for braces for your kid's teeth, wouldn't it have been nice if they took a pair of pliers out and straightened them right out there on the first visit, and that was it? Well, that's not really how it worked, right? You had to go in for a year and a half or whatever, and every time it finally quit hurting, you'd have to go back in so they could tighten it up again. Why? Because if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be imposing enough demand on the teeth to change. And I got to tell you, the position of your spine, as you've just heard, because this was towards the end of my talk, is a hell of a lot more important than whether your teeth are straight or not. I've never heard of anybody dying of crooked teeth. Anyway, so we would decide, and that's what they would do. And then run education. So for the first 15 times they came in, I gave them a piece of literature. First couple were just brochures that actually came from Ted Koren in my day. I don't know what's around now. Brochures that were very much aligned with my philosophy. But then I think visit 3 through 15, we created these little postcards. We called them education cards. And this was really cool because somebody else created them based on hearing my talk. So they were perfect for my talk. So they were 12 little bits of my talk distilled down into a paragraph or 2 with a nice little graphic. Like and so my communication was, hey, do you remember from my talk that you eat Twinkies and the next day it becomes your eyeball and your spleen? you know, it didn't have a picture of Twinkies, it had a picture of apples and fruit and stuff. That your innate intelligence miraculously, you know, breaks down food into atoms and then reorganizes those atoms into you. Wow, yeah, I do remember that. Okay, well, here's the card. Pass it on when you're done, and stamp our name and address on the back of it. It was cool. People loved those things, and they put them on their refrigerator until they got all 12. You know, I should have given them some prize for collecting all 12 and then cashing them back in or something. That would have been good. I didn't think of it then. So that was that. What else did I do? Lots of things. So table talk in general. So for the first 15 visits, I didn't have to worry about it. All my talk was based on the card. So I would adjust them, and then we would be getting up, and I'd say, do you remember from the talk? And that probably wasn't a great question either, because, you know, people will always say yes to that no matter what. But you can come up with a better question or a better script to come up if you do something like that. I think it's awesome. It really helped me keep my conversation on target. It really helped me, you know, because again, you're going to do a beautiful talk. You're going to do maybe a beautiful report of findings. And the first visit, somebody's going to say, going to start talking about symptoms. I guarantee it. And it's not that they didn't get it. It's not that they want to piss you off. It's just that they probably want to be heard. So the best approach to that is, I understand that you're dealing with these things. Let me remind you, blah, blah, blah. You may have to do that a few times. You may have to do that a few hundred times. It's all right. When it happens, please just, the key there is not to take it personally, not to take it like you haven't done a good job, not to take it that they're stupid. They either just need more information or they want to be heard. And you'll know that. You'll, you know, so a lot of times it's just like, I understand, let's check you. Sometimes that's all you have to say. I understand, let's check, see how your spine doing, and make sure you're innate on the job. You know, whatever you want to say. Okay, beyond the cards. And this was a Sigafus assignment. And you can take it on if you want. He would have us come up with 30 phrases at a time. So he would, you know, every couple of months, this would mean we'd come up with 30 phrases, 30 beautiful chiropractic phrases like power's on. Or as Peter Amlinger would say, the power's up. Because if the power was off, you probably couldn't have helped them. But the power's on is good. The power's up. If you heard these expressions, the power that made the body heals the body, and the power's on in you. So, you know, something like that. I came up with cute ones. Like I saw, you know, sparks come out of your toes on that adjustment, or I could just see your kidney cells dancing with life right now, or I had to see you glowing right now. And I know that as you leave the office, 100 people are going to like be lifted up. You know, make it inspiring, make it affirmative, but say that to everybody that day. And, you know, it doesn't seem like a big deal when you're seeing a few people, but when you're seeing 200 people a day, you don't want to have to come up with things to say. And you don't want to have to wait for opportunities or have to think at all. Kira, I think some of you missed the beginning of this. The whole purpose of me working all this into my procedures so I didn't have to think. And I could just be in my heart and share with people from that way. So that's a beautiful thing. You know, today I'm going to tell everybody their kidney cells are dancing with life. Everybody clear on that? Because people ask me about table talk all the time. You know, and I will not sit here and tell you that I never talked to anybody about anything other than chiropractic. There were about 3 negatives in that sentence, but I hope you followed. Once in a while, I'd get into chats with people. And, you know, one thing that helped me tremendously was my wife was the energy flow person. And I know that after a few seconds of that, I'd see her standing in the doorway, tapping her foot and giving me what I call the look. So that was very helpful for me. You need somebody like that in your office. You know, I enjoyed connecting with people on a more human level sometimes. and you get to know people, and people, when they start inviting you to their kids' births and their weddings and all this kind of stuff, it's hard. Those boundaries get blurred a little bit. Not but. And that's why it's so important to have something planned, to have something prepared to talk about, because otherwise it's really easy to get into other kinds of conversations that may not be so productive. Okay? When I was seeing 18, 19, 20 people a day and talking to people ad nauseum and taking on all their symptoms and stuff, I would go home at night and I could barely move. I could barely like put two words together. I would describe how tired I would feel. And then, years later in my practice, when I'm seeing 200 people a day, I'm ready to go dancing. I It may sound funny, but you've probably even heard it from other chiropractors. Talking is a big energy drain, especially talking about the same stuff all the time, or talking about drivel, or talking about stories, or talking about certainly symptoms. It's a drain. The ancient yogis say we lose 80% of our energy out of our mouth. And I will tell you that is true. And every now and then, in fact, for years, every month, I would do a silent day where I would not say a word. And it was particularly funny and cool when that day happened to be somebody's first visit, and they've heard me just rant and rave for 45 minutes at the health talk. Then they come in and I'm not talking at all. It was a little tricky with first visits, but we managed. We can talk about silent days another time. So that was table talk. Okay. In their first 4 months of care, my wife, again, would check in with them. I guess it was our version of a re-exam. But it was, the first month was just checking in with people about how they're doing with their intentions and if they have created any new intentions, because that's a really good question to ask. Because a lot of people, so here's the deal. Sigafus used to say that at 10 visits, people tend to leave because they're either feeling better or they're not. I want you to think about that for a second. Have you thought about it? That most people leave chiropractic after 8, 10, 12 visits because they're either feeling better already or they're not feeling better. Either way, they leave. Unless we have clued them in that there's something more going on here and this is about something else. Okay? So if you start on the basis of symptoms, you're gonna have that as a criteria in whether they think they need the care or not. And of course, that just makes sense, right? But not from a chiropractic standpoint, it doesn't make sense. And that's why I hit that hard about symptoms in my talk. That symptoms generally mean your body's working. Your innate intelligence is doing exactly what it needs to do. That it's adapting. And I would say, man, if I go out in the garden and I use a hoe, you know what a hoe is? An HOE. It's a garden tool. I know it means other things with different spellings, but this is like a rake sort of thing. And so if I use a hoe and it's got a wooden handle and I use this thing for years, what is going to happen to the handle of the hoe? It's going to wear away, right? It's going to get thinner. What happens to my hands? Oh, I get calluses. They get thicker. Okay, friction's being applied to both. How come the rake gets skinnier and my hand gets fatter? It's an adaptation. And okay, most people would look at their calluses and not say, yippee, hooray, innate intelligence, you're so incredibly smart for, laying down more skin to protect yourself. No, it's ugly. It's something that needs to be gotten rid of. Again, this is a beautiful, simple example of why a symptom is not necessarily bad. And of course, fever, vomiting. I always use the Reggie Gold example, which was if you go to the Chinese restaurant and you order chow mein, and instead of chow mein, you get to mein, which is not a word you hear anymore, but it's nasty bacterial food poisoning, probably before they knew which bacteria was involved. So you order chow mein, but you got ptomaine. All right, you're with me? 18 months later, or excuse me, 18 hours later, you're throwing up and you have a fever and you have diarrhea and you're sweating and you feel like total shit. What is going on? You're getting rid of the poison in every direction. And the question is, if you ate ptomaine and you didn't have a fever and you didn't throw up and you didn't have diarrhea, what would happen to you? And you want the people to answer these questions. I think I'd probably die. I said, I think you're probably right. But at least you were feeling good right up to the minute it happened. That was sarcasm, folks. Yeah. So tell them a little about symptoms and pain. You'll have to wait for next week for that, or 2 weeks. It's good. It's got you excited, right? All right, where are we? So yeah, so the first month was about new intentions. I don't even remember what the check-ins. They were just really check-ins, just checking in. We're just seeing if everything's okay. I think at the third month we'd have them fill out a written questionnaire. I could talk to my wife and get more information about what we did. But in the meantime, the main idea there was just to check in with them. Okay. Which is good. Shows you still care. Because here, very important principle, and you get them as they come to me. Sorry. But I think the number one reason people leave, especially people who have been coming for a while, the number one reason people leave chiropractic practices is because they no longer feel special. They no longer think they matter to the chiropractor or to the staff. They're either ignored or taken for granted. Are you listening to me here? This is a gem. This is a gem. So you want to build things into your procedures to help people remember that they are special to you, because it's just human nature. When you see people over and over, you tend to pay more attention to the newer ones, right? But you don't want to get into that habit. In fact, pay more attention to the people who have been coming, especially if it's a choice between that person and a new person. A new person is not even in your family yet. So never give priority to a new person over an existing person. And I hate these terms, but we've never come up with better ones. All people exist, but you know what I mean. Okay. Yeah. So those check-ins are good, and sending people a thank you card now and then is good. After 4 months, we would give them a $10 gift certificate to some place in town that we like to support. The health food store or the positive card store or somebody we wanted to support, etc. That was a nice thing. Again, and we like rewarding people for referring, because that's one of the things we asked them to do. So these are all ways that people can feel special. We gave them a free visit. We sent them a postcard that they got to put in the box. However you wanted to do it. I preferred rewarding the referrer and not the referee. Understand what I'm saying? I would rather give the person who referred a free visit than the person coming in, because again, they don't even know what they're signing up for yet, right? Okay. So then about once a month, we would do what I called Chiro 102. It was either another talk based on chiropractic philosophy, or it was something that we used to call eat a bagel, save a life. I don't know if you have bagels, so you're going to have to come up with your own thing. But what we did there is I would invite all the people who had been new in the last couple of weeks to come to an extra special thing, and we would feed you, etc., because people go where there's food. That's another gem right there. And and so they would come in, and it would be like 40 minutes. So for 20 minutes, I'd go over the talk again. I would draw the safety pin cycle again, because the purpose of this was to help people refer. I'd already told them I expected them of them, but then I realized I'm sending people out into this cruel, hostile toward chiropractic world without any, tools or without any ammunition with which to do that. So I felt it was important. So I would go over the safety pin cycle and make sure they could explain it. And we would each take a couple of seconds, because that's all it takes to explain the safety pin cycle, to my satisfaction anyway. So they would do it, and then we would deal with questions, concerns, like, when you've tried to refer people, what have you heard? So we would deal with those things that they're going to hear, like, oh, my physical therapist told me that if I start getting adjusted, I'm going to have to get adjusted for the rest of my life. Or if I get adjusted too much, it's going to loosen my ligaments and make me unstable, and stuff that they're hearing. And we'll have time to cover those if you want. But it was great. It was great to have people actually tell me what they were encountering or thought they might encounter out there in the world, so they could be better advocates, because they wanted to be. But, again, it's hard to send somebody out there saying refer people when they're going to run into these things. They're going to run into somebody saying, oh, I would never go to a chiropractor because my veterinarian's hairdresser's second cousin's wife had a bad experience. It's unfortunately kind of where we're at. So we would cover that, hey, have you ever had a bad experience at a restaurant? Have you ever had a bad experience at a doctor? Have you ever had a bad experience in a movie theater? If you don't like the movie, you leave, you go to a different one. Let's not banish an entire profession based on a bad experience that not even, you didn't even have. Anyway, we'll deal with all those questions if you want. I just want to hopefully run through the list of procedures. So eat a bagel, save a life was great. You can do anything like that. You can do fun things. We do I think a bi-monthly newsletter. We had articles in the office all the time. Again, these days it would probably be some information that gives people a different perspective on vaccines, or that's what we were doing since 1986. I've been an anti-vaxxer for 35 years. I must say they're paying a little more attention to us now than they ever have before, but that's good. That's a good thing, because we need to be paid attention to. Apparently, we haven't been doing such a great job for the last 35 years, so I apologize for that, but I have done my best. Really have. In fact, I wrote letters to the editor every week for a long time about ear infections, I was, not Billy DeMoss, but a thorn in the side of the medical community here. And in fact, on my 40th birthday, which was 1996, I don't want to hear if you weren't born yet, there was a whole page, 2 pages in our local paper of rebuttals to my last letter to the editor from the big pediatrician in town, from the public health director of El Dorado County in California. It was like the best birthday present I ever got in my life. So anyway, and I'm still here. I'm still alive. This is good. So articles, and then I used whiteboards. I used whiteboards a lot. So when you walked into the office, there was a whiteboard with a positive affirmation or something really sarcastic. Like, okay, when you're seeing a lot of people and it snows in Lake Tahoe in May, you're going to hear complaints from 150 people about the same thing, and I could not tolerate that. So we'd put something on the board that would say something like, I hear the weather is beautiful in Bosnia, or wherever the worst place in the world, worst crap going on in the world was happening. And, you know, people would get the idea that maybe they didn't want to complain about the fact that it snowed. You hear what I'm saying? Usually it was more positive than that. I'd use the whiteboards in my adjusting rooms, and every few days I would change them, and I'd put something on there like dead bodies do not spike fevers, or love your mucus. That was one of my favorite ones. I'd put that up periodically. Love your mucus. And the best thing that could happen was somebody saying like, why? Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. Did you know that mucus contains the only substance known to man that can kill a virus? And do you know that you not only know how to create it, but you know where to put it? You put it right here. This is where the viruses, you know, tend to come in. Isn't that brilliant? And then you make this stuff kind of sticky, so it gets trapped here. And then when enough of it accumulates, you create this neuromuscular event called a sneeze to get it all the hell out. That's why you should love your mucus. Dead people, not much mucus. Probably don't have to worry about viruses too much either, but that's besides the point. So yeah, we were always educating, always reminding, always, and again, it was good. It was fun. You can do it in a fun way. And it helps. It really, really helps. And I already told you, I think, about all the people that are telling my current chiropractor, the people I used to adjust 25, 30 years ago, that are reciting these things. And I think that's really cool. Really cool. That they remember these things, that they remember they're the ones doing the healing, that they remember they eat Twinkies, and you know, they all remember the Twinkies. They all remember the big number of things their body does in every second. They all, you know, they all remember the analogies with a dead body. They all remember to love their mucus. I think that's great. I think that's spectacular. So people can get it. And then, as I also said, you know, education can extends to your office itself. You know, don't rather obvious, but don't have medical magazines in your office. Don't have posters about symptoms if that's not your thing. Don't have symptoms about spinal curves if you've kind of moved past that as your main intention and communication for system. You know, make it consistent. We asked people to bring their kids, so I had a kids area. That's congruent. You know, there are chiropractors who say bring your kids, but you know, their offices look like if anybody put a fingerprint in any particular spot, you know, alarms would go off. You know, people won't bring their kids to a place like that. They won't bring their kids if there isn't a place for the kids, and if there isn't an energy that welcomes the kids. And we had posters about kids, the little dinosaur, the Spinosaurus, and the, you know, used to have really cute posters of kids chiropractic, and I'm sure they still do. Any questions about any of that? I'm sure I'm forgetting pieces of the procedure. Well, I always ask you for questions when there's like 2 minutes to go. You can tell I don't really like questions, but that's not really true. I just lose track of time. Anybody have a quick question? A really quick question?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you specifically ask your patients to not speak during the adjustment? And would you be willing to say something to them, or would you be completely silent, or how was it?
Oh, well, I forgot to tell you one of the most important things. There was a little sign on the door, on the doorway from the reception area to where the adjusting rooms were, that said no negative thoughts allowed beyond this point. And then we had right next to it a table where they could write their negative thoughts down and put them in this little bucket and then pull out a little strip which had a positive affirmation. So they knew that negative thoughts were not. And I would tell them that if you don't dump your negative thoughts in the bucket first, you're going to get zapped by electricity. Anyway, I said in the talk that, believe it or not, I won't be talking much, and I encourage you not to talk so much because I'd rather you focus on where you want to be than where you are. So I certainly don't want you to talk about, you know, how the appearance of things is now. rather you focus on where you want to be. That's going to be what our communication's about. So yes, and then on the silent days, I would strongly encourage them not to talk. Because some people would try to talk twice as much to kind of make up for the silence. Or talk twice as loud, which I thought was really interesting. Or whisper. You know, everybody had a different reaction to it, which was one of my favorite things about it. But I would encourage them. We would print out this visualization that we would have them focus on for silent days, which we would tell them it would work any day, which was just like visualizing the bone that Dr. Stew is about to adjust like a dam. And when he moves that thing, just have the water flowing through this dam, like, you know, released. It was beautiful visualization we came up with. So yes, I did encourage people not to talk so much, especially about what they tend to talk about. Great question.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I can see you took that task quite literally. I like the little negative thought corner and everything. That's really good.
That was really good. People love that. You know, people would ask me, do you go home and read them? And I'm like, what, are you freaking crazy? Why on earth would I do that? No, we burned them. We burned them in our wood stove every night. No, I didn't want to read people's negative thoughts. Oh, God. Anyway, I have to go. Francesca, you're all set to rob
I
a
was
bank.
here all the time, but I didn't have the video.
I love you all. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Stu.
you.
I really love questions.
Bye.
Please don't be afraid to ask questions.
For sure. Thank
All
you so
right.
much.
See you in a couple.
All right.
Bye.